You heard me mention in our quick discussion about functions that for a graph to be a function, it needs to pass the vertical line test, which we're all very familiar with at this point. For a function to be one-to-one, it has to pass the horizontal line test. And we call this function one-to-one because that means for every value of x, there's exactly one value of y. All the x's are used once, and all the y's are used exactly once. Now, in a function that is not one-to-one, y's can be repeated. So if we were to put this on the coordinate plane, we know that if we put a 2 in, we get a 4 out. But we also know that if we put a negative 2 in, we get a 4 out. This function would fail the horizontal line test. This is not one-to-one. And this is important because when we find the inverse of a function, an inverse of a function is going to rotate that function 90 degrees clockwise so that it looks like this. So this function on the left, this quadratic equation on the left, the parabola opening up, is a function but not one-to-one. So this is a function but not one-to-one, which means its inverse is not a function. So the inverse is not a function. So we're looking for functions that are one-to-one. Here's a function that's one-to-one. We've got our square root property. Our square root function. That function is one-to-one. No y's are repeated. And when we rotate that 90 degrees, we end up with, and really what it is it's a rotation. Actually, it's a rotation 270 degrees, I believe. I think it's a rotation 270 degrees going counterclockwise. In any case, the x's and y's are reversed. That's something in geometry. Those rotations in geometry always get me. So your x's and y's are reversed. They're going to tell that's 180 degrees. Now that I see the ordered pairs, now that I go back to algebra, you're like, oh yeah, that's 180 degree. Yep, 180 degree rotation. But this right here on the left, I digress. This right here is a function, and it is one-to-one. It passes the horizontal line test. It's one-to-one. The one on the right is the inverse, right? And it is also a function. Now, what makes the inverse a function? Check this out. This one-to-oneness directly correlates to the inverse being a function. This not one-to-one directly correlates to the inverse not being a function. And that's what one-to-oneness is all about. So we're going to, in the next video, evaluate a function and then decide whether or not it is one-to-one. Again, it is always okay to lean back on your college algebra knowledge in which you are connecting the algebraic representation to the graphical representation. That's why we work so hard in college algebra to make that connection so that when you get to those higher level classes, you don't have to just rely on algebra. You can rely on that graphical representation to help you better understand what's happening with this one-to-oneness, for example.